favorite things when I'm playing with my serger at home is playing with decorative threads to create some stunning edge finishes. And I have a sampling of some of the threads that I use. This is certainly not my entire thread collection. This is actually a 12 weight cotton, which is a lot of fun. You can use this in your upper and lower looper, and I do use it in my needle. When I use it in my needle, I always make sure I have a larger eye needle, like a top stitch needle. The next thread in our collection, this is a 40 weight cotton thread. Again, upper looper, lower looper, and this one I can use in my needle with just a standard needle. The one behind is what we call a texturized nylon thread. This is great in a rolled edge or any edge where you want coverage because the thread kind of expands as you're stitching. This is a fun thread that's a rayon and a metallic, just for a little bit of glitter, which I always think is fun. And the last thread is a rayon thread that doesn't have a whole lot of twist on it. It's very similar to a pearl cotton, and this is actually what we're going to use in our first adventure with decorative threads. Now, I've threaded my upper looper already in this rayon thread, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to thread our lower looper, and I'm going to show you one way to do that, and that's what they call is a tie off method. The first thing that I'm going to do is I want to clip my overlock thread so that I have a little bit of thread tail. I need something to tie onto my other thread, and then I'll remove that spool. I have one more thing I need to remove, and that is that cone holder that sits down here. I don't want that on my spool spin because, as you can see, it won't fit. My thread spool won't be able to slide down into place. Now I'm place my thread spool in place, and I'm going to take my thread through that first guide, and now I'm going to go ahead and create a small knot to tie these two threads together. Now, when you use the tie off method, I do have a rule of caution. Go slow because you have a knot, and anytime you have a knot and a little extra thread, it's real easy to decide to pull something, and when you pull it, you might possibly pull something out of alignment, or more likely you break your threads and then you're back to starting over. And we're knotted. Okay, we're going to open that front cover. Now we're ready to pull that thread through. The first thing I really want to do is I want to find that thread where it comes out at the back of the presser foot, and make sure that the presser foot is actually up, because when the presser foot's down, there's tension on that thread as it's going through it, and I do not want that tension. And then I'm just ever so gently going to pull that thread through. I've got it through that first guide, and it should be coming down through, and I can feel a little bit of resistance as it comes down through the tension disc. Here's my thread. It's going to come through my first guide. Here's my second guide. Go ahead and open up that front cover so you can see the entire. Here we go through that guide. And here we're going to get a little bit of tension here. And then the last thing is the eye of the looper. Now my knot might be a little too big. As you can see, it's a little too big to fit through that eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that thread, pull that blue thread out, and I'm actually going to thread the eye of my looper by hand rather than force that knot through. And you may run across that. Don't force that knot through, because you could cause some problems or have some issues actually with the formation of your stitch. Not necessarily the looper, but more likely the formation of that stitch. So now I've got the thread through that eye of that looper. And what I always do is I just kind of review my threading to make sure that I don't have anything catching anywhere that might cause some problems in that stitch formation. Close the side cover, the front cover, and my last thing that I want to do is I'm going to leave my tension settings at my 4 for my left needle, 4 for my right needle, 4 for the upper, and 4 for the lower, but I want to lengthen out my stitch length. Whenever I use a decorative thread, I always like to make sure that I'm on that longest setting, and then I want to make sure my differential feed is at that normal setting. Now I'm ready to sew. I've got everything set up on my machine, placing my fabric underneath my presser foot up to that cutting guide, and let's start stitching. Now, one of the things that you might find when you're working with decorative threads, because they can tend to be a little heavier, you might have to play around with your tensions. we're going to take a look at our stitch first and see what we need to do. And I can tell immediately that I have a tension issue. See how that upper looper thread isn't quite making it to that red needle thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to back off on my tensions. This is all a little heavier. This thread is a little heavier. So I kind of equate it to the heavier the thread, I might have to loosen up those tensions. So I'm going to go down about a half a click on my needles to about 3.5, and I'm going to take my upper looper to 3 and my lower looper to 3. What that does is that allows the machine to give that stitch more thread, so that will hopefully bring that upper looper thread into the correct position. And if I looked at the back side, while it may be kind of funky and cool here, it's not exactly the look that I'm after. I have another piece of fabric already. Place that underneath the presser foot, and we're going to start stitching. And I might just take a little peek just to make sure everything is good. Might do a little of adjustments. And I can see I still have a little bit of a problem with a couple threads, so I think I'm going to back off on those needles just a little bit more. And we'll see if we can correct this. So when it comes to decorative threads, sometimes it is a balancing act with getting those tensions just right to accommodate those threads. And I think we've got it. Here we go. How beautiful is that? You can see that upper looper thread is clearly coming to both needles. My threads are meeting across the top, and on the back side, look at how stunning that is. So that's how we handle, or how we work with decorative threads on the Baby Lock Vibrant. Just a few key things that you always want to remember is to lengthen that stitch length, and you may need to adjust those tensions depending upon the thread that you're using.